Welcome to the Bible Story Podcast. My name is John Draper. This summer at Covenant Bay Bible Camp, our theme is glory. Now today we're going to be looking at the story of Jesus' Transfiguration. And I can't think of a better story about glory than this one. Now leading up to this story, Jesus had been getting more and more popular. He had been doing all the kinds of miracles. He'd been teaching. People were really impressed with him. And they didn't really know what to do with him. You see, if they put their trust in him, they would kind of be on the fringe. Jesus was not a normal rabbi. He was a bit different. And so would they be included in the synagogues and the other places of worship if they had put their trust in him? On the other side, they really wanted a Messiah. They really wanted someone to deal with the Romans who were occupying Israel at the time. And so they had good reason to put their trust in Jesus, and yet that wasn't the type of Messiah Jesus was. And so they didn't really know what to do with him. And so we get to this story of the Jesus Transfiguration, and we find it in a number of different Gospels, but we're going to look at the Gospel of Mark, Chapter 9, verses 2 through 13. Let me read it for you. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed, and his clothes became dazzling white, far whiter than any earthly bleach could ever make them. Then Elijah and Moses appeared and began talking with Jesus. Peter exclaimed, "Rabbi, it's wonderful for us to be here. Let's make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He said this because he didn't really know what else to say, for they were all terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved Son. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they saw only Jesus with them. As they went back down the mountain, he told them not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept it to themselves, but they often asked each other what he meant by rising from the dead. Then they asked him, "Why do the teachers of religious law insist that Elijah must return before the Messiah comes?" Jesus responded, "Elijah is indeed coming first to get everything ready. Yet, why do the scriptures say that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be treated with utter contempt? But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they chose to abuse him, just as the scriptures predicted." Jesus often went alone to be by himself in a quiet place. And sometimes he took his disciples with him, but this time it was different. This time his appearance changed, it transformed, and he began to shine brightly. His clothes were like white, as whiter than any bleach, it says, could make them. In Matthew's account in his gospel, he says that his face shone. Now, this is a really big transformation that would really have gotten the disciples' attention. His presence must have been overwhelming. Now, on top of this, a cloud descends onto the mountain and envelops the whole area. And then they hear a voice, God's voice. Moses and Elijah show up, they chat with Jesus for a little while, and then they're gone, and then the disciples and Jesus head back down the mountain, talking and conversing along the way. So there's a lot going on here in this story, and it's really hard to capture the essence of the experience in its fullness. If you've ever tried to take a picture of a sunset, you'll know what I mean, right? Like, I try to take a picture of this beautiful sunset, the horizon, the landscape, the beautiful clouds that are orange and pink and purple. And I try to take these pictures and capture the fullness of the beauty that is before me, but I take the picture and I look at the picture and I look at what's still in front of me and I'm like, that doesn't compare. This is far more beautiful, far more overwhelming than this little snapshot on my camera. And so I'm left there thinking, how do I describe such an experience? I think this is the way it must be for these writers. How do you capture such a huge, magnificent, wonderful event with words that don't do justice to the transformation they saw in Jesus, the voice that they heard from heaven, the cloud that descended upon them? I mean, this was a big, big experience. So imagine that you're one of these disciples and you see Jesus' appearance transforming before your eyes, and it begins to, the brightness that's coming off him begins to hurt your eyes. His face is shining, his clothes are beaming white. It's bizarre, it's a little scary. In fact, it's a lot scary. Mark says the disciples were terrified. But I doubt that does justice to the word or to the experience. Terrified probably doesn't even begin to describe all of the things that they were feeling. Then Moses and Elijah show up. And somehow, maybe that's because they introduced themselves, or maybe they just had been given some divine knowledge, put into their minds somehow, that they just knew this was Moses and Elijah. I don't know. Maybe they remembered some scriptures from long ago. Regardless, they knew it was Moses and Elijah with them, and that's overwhelming. I have to think that this whole experience, the magnitude of the experience, the cloud descending, the voice of God speaking, was overwhelming. Overwhelming in such a way that it changed the way they saw Jesus. The full glory of Jesus was on display, and they were overwhelmed. It was too much for them to take in. So this story is a big story, and the question comes to us, what do we do with a story like this? I mean, it's not logical. I'm certain that Peter, James, and John all interacted with Jesus as though he was just merely a man. And he was fully man. But in this moment, they understood that he was fully God as well. Fully man, fully God. And that would have been very confusing and very disorientating for all of them. And this experience would have changed their relationship with him. They would have seen Jesus differently as a result. In fact, they better understood what he meant when he said things like, the Father and I are one. That's in John chapter 10, verse 30. Or John 14:14 says, yes, ask me for anything and I will do it. They better understood Jesus' teachings from before in light of seeing him in all his glory. Their belief in Jesus, their trust in him was strengthened as a result of this experience. Now, it's one thing to see Jesus shine brightly. It's another to hear the voice of God with this cloud surrounding you. It would have been terrifying. The voice of God speaking to them, not Jesus' voice, but God's voice speaking to him, saying, this is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him. And I wonder if the reality of how they treated him simply as a man, or primarily as a man at this point, began to change. They can listen to him. They can trust what he has to say. He is fully man and fully God. You and I need moments like this too. Perhaps we won't get a mountaintop experience with the transfiguration of Jesus, but we need moments like this where we too can better understand Jesus. Moments that are not filled with necessarily a bunch of logical, reasoned teachings about him, but are full of His glory, that go beyond the logic, that go beyond the reason, and allow us to experience Jesus Christ more fully in all of His glory. Jesus' glory will teach us who He is in ways that nothing else can. I have some discussion questions for you and your friends, so gather up in a circle and we'll begin. Question 1 is this. Mark describes the disciples as terrified. What other emotions would they have been experiencing? Hit pause and share. Question 2. If you had experienced Jesus in this way, what doubts would you no longer struggle with? Hit pause and share. Question number 3. In light of this story, how should we change the way we speak of Jesus and interact with Him? Hit pause and share. Thanks for hanging out with me. Remember this, that Jesus' glory will teach us who He is in ways that nothing else can. This week, take some time to spend in prayer with Jesus. He loves spending time with you. It would be a great thing to do. Encourage and pray for your friends throughout this week and help them grow in a relationship with Jesus, because there's really nothing more important. Again, thanks for hanging out with me. Have a great week.